Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsey Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Today's episode is sponsored by Inside Tracker and supported by Orgain and Practice Better. Stay tuned to hear more about these amazing companies that I'm partnered with. But for now, let's get to the conversation. Hello, fans and listeners. Lindsey Elizabeth Cortez here, your host of the podcast, sports dietitian, owner of Rise Up Nutrition. I'm here today with a guest, Carrie Cueto. She is a licensed clinical therapist in both California and Colorado, specializing in the treatment of anxiety disorders, including OCD, panic disorder, compulsive skin picking, hair pulling, phobias, body dysmorphia, and eating disorders. Carrie is the owner of Cultivate Healing, a private practice treating adolescents and adults, individuals from California and Colorado via telehealth. Carrie earned her undergraduate degree from UC Berkeley and master's degree in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. She is certified in a form of cognitive behavioral therapy called ERP, Exposure and Response Prevention, that is considered the gold standard for OCD treatment. Carrie uses this approach to teach her clients how to overcome their fears and learn to tolerate discomfort in order to fully live their lives. Carrie, thank you for having this conversation with me and all of our guests and listeners today. I'm excited to have you on.
Well, thanks so much, Lindsey. I am excited as well.
Yeah. So I'll share with our listeners that I met Carrie through a mutual client. I had a client join the Fast Track who actually, maybe you can remember better than I can, Carrie,
Yeah.
if she joined the Fast Track at the same time that she started working with you, if she was working with you before then.
I think she joined the Fast Track first, and then she wanted to add on the anxiety therapy piece. And then that's where I came on board and we connected.
Yeah. Which is wonderful because my work with clients, we address mindset. I always share with them, we do a lot of mindset work, but I'm not a therapist. And we have a mindset coach, which is not a therapist. And so if there are, as we'll get into talking about today, very often with disordered eating or eating disorders, there might be co-occurring things going on, like anxiety, like depression, like OCD. And, mindset things are helpful. Positive mantras, reframing our mind, like that can help to a certain extent. But if there's a disorder, an anxiety disorder, that needs to be treated, with a specialist. And so for this client, she was able to work in the Fast Track program with me and with your services to really get the full spectrum of what she needed.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, I'd love to share my experience with you a little bit that I found finding you to be so exciting because I felt like my client was getting above and beyond she was getting the nutrition information, but she seemed to take ownership in an exciting way. And so we were able to really make progress with her eating disorder. So I could see the difference of maybe in the structure you provide in your program.
Yeah, I think it really helped to get this particular client great results in working with both of us. And, and that I knew, I had that, I think, security of okay, she was being taken care of mentally by her sessions with you. And then we could focus on what we needed to focus on in our sessions. So it was really great.
Yep.
And yeah, well, let's start, Carrie, actually with just a little bit of your personal background, maybe what made you decide to study, psychology or get into this field in the first place? And where's your passion for it come from?
Yeah. So I feel so often the story is it's a bit of a roundabout, path, but I'm a middle child in my family. So I was kind of born a natural counselor, we might say. There's a lot of coming to me and talking to me about what's going on in the family. I grew up also as dancer. So that was my background with maybe sports and athletics, competitive dancer into college, did cheerleading as well, where I experienced my own personal experience with anxiety and some disordered eating, which really I didn't realize until later, looking back at some patterns I had. And so anyways, I started a clinical master's program in psychology, actually after not what my undergrad major was in political science. So totally different. I got into a retail management job and realized the only part I really loved was talking to the customers or talking to my employees. I just wanted to learn their life stories. And so I made the jump into psychology. So yeah, and then that's been a path into anxiety specifically, as I found it's a very solution focused type of therapy, which I myself thrive off of. And I love seeing my clients able to make specific steps towards overcoming their anxiety.
Yeah, I love that solution focus, right? Because it's, okay, we have X problem. Here's like a process and a solution that we're working towards. You know, therapy could be helpful throughout your whole life for all life things that pop up, but you specialize in that. This is a problem. We're solving it.
Yes, absolutely. And to add on to that, it's been neat to see the research with anxiety treatments is there's lots of evidence that with very specific types, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in this conversation, called exposure therapy, we can actually just, there's changes in our brain that happen, and it's no longer having the same responses to previous, what we call triggers. So it's pretty exciting to know, yes, I'm talking to people about their life problems, but we're actually making significant changes as well.
And real changes in your brain too, right?
Yes.
I think some people think therapy is just talk, and it's like, no, there's like structural changes happening within the brain and how it works and how it functions. And that's why you see improvement. Yeah. So let's start then with, and I kind of mentioned it in your bio of all the things that you help with, but like, what is an anxiety disorder?
No, it's such a great question, because anxiety is a term we throw around so frequently that it almost can lose its meaning or be confusing. So anxiety is just the word we use for the biological response to a future threat. So fear is a current threat, right? If a bear suddenly stormed into my office right now, I would, react obviously in fear, but anxiety is the thought of what are listeners thinking of my conversation right now? I can predict the future and come up with a response to that. And so anxiety is actually very useful as an emotion. We need it in order to keep ourselves safe as humans, to prepare for future dangers, to maybe even prepare for like a test and know we need to focus and spend extra time and we're going to need extra energy. So in that way, anxiety, we'd say, is functional. It's a useful emotion to have.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And of course, as I'd say probably most of us have experienced in the past few years, especially after the pandemic, and there's been so many recent world changes, anxiety can become more chronic, where we're looking at it's daily, we're having worries. Daily, we feel our body's going into this fight or flight response. We feel like our thoughts are sticky. We can't get out of them. There's it feels like an exaggerated response to what we might logically know might not be dangerous. And that's when we start to look at the term clinical anxiety, or maybe generalized anxiety disorder.
That was a great definition. Never really thought about how fear is a current thing and anxiety is your response to a future threat. And I think what's interesting about anxiety too is where it's helpful is if it's in response to a future threat, where it's probably becomes unhelpful if it's in response to a future threat that maybe potentially might not even exist. Right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of anxiety about things that like are irrational or aren't going to happen or are highly unlikely to happen, and it's, here's a generalized example, but, if we constantly have anxiety about, getting into a car, and driving because of that potential of car accidents, well, then we're never going to get in the car, and then we're never going to have a job, and then we're never going to be able to go to the grocery store. And that's when anxiety can really take over and affect your life negatively, because you're making a decision on something that might not happen.
Right, right. And a huge part of anxiety treatment is actually an acceptance that there's so much outside of our control that, yes, it would be unfair for me to state you will be safe in your car. I mean, I can't actually predict that. We can predict that probably you will be safe. We can look at statistics and how frequent are car accidents. Are you likely to get hurt? But a bigger part, like what you're saying, is this risk worth the outcome? So yes, there's a small risk here, and the outcome I need to go to work or pick up my kids or be able to have freedom outside my home might be worth taking that small risk. And so anxiety treatment is actually a big focus on kind of flipping the idea of like, I have to have absolute security before I can do something, to all the time we take risks. I'm sitting here talking to you. How do I actually know the roof isn't going to fall down on my head? Right? I mean, I'm predicting it's not, but we don't actually know yet. You and I have decided it's worth it to have this conversation, and we're taking this risk.
Yeah. And I love, that was a great example too, because it seems so ridiculous, right? Like the chances of, but yes, we take risks every day of our life. And so acceptance of those risks and weighing out, the benefit of taking that risk. Yeah, really important. So, one of your specialties is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Can you share with us how, what is that? How is that related to anxiety? And just share some.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. So first I'll kind of explain what is that and then how does it relate. So it is really a pattern in our brain of having intrusive thoughts, which is what we call the obsession. And so those typically start with what if I step on this crack and then that means I'm going to have bad luck today and I fail my test. Right. And then we have a compulsion that sometimes randomly gets paired. Sometimes there's a logic to it of, oh, well, if I purposely avoid these cracks, then maybe I will have some reassurance and I will do well on my tests today. Mm-hmm. And so it's a pattern of thought paired with anxiety. We do a response that helps us feel better. We get temporary reassurance. And that's what's really key is, unfortunately, our brain then comes up with a new idea. But what if that wasn't enough? What if now it's not the cracks that are the problem, but actually the fact that you're wearing these types of shoes? And so that might be, I need to add on, I need to change my shoes and I need to avoid the cracks. And so OCD is very misunderstood. It's often seen as like I'm very neat, or someone who's very particular about things, but it can be really debilitating in that these intrusive thoughts are often about maybe taboo themes, or they're distressing. People don't want to talk about them, and they have kind of their own secret way they're managing this anxiety internally with routines, compulsions, rituals they're doing.
Yeah, I would like to shed light on what you mentioned of how OCD is misunderstood. And I think anxiety too. Those terms are just thrown around so often. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion on, no, we shouldn't use them lightly. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. And I think with anxiety too, going back to that really quickly, like you mentioned, people can experience and maybe should experience anxiety. Some anxiety is good. And so, I want to sit here right now and say I do not suffer from chronic anxiety, but that doesn't mean I have no anxiety in my life. I have moments of anxiety. I have a day of anxiety. Sometimes I have a night of anxiety. Sometimes I have a week of anxiety, but dealing with these moments of anxiety is very different than dealing with chronic anxiety. Probably the same way with OCD, that having a one-time thought and behavior, to help you cope, that day might be okay, but it's when it's suddenly this is the only way I know how to cope. But I'd love to hear, I think the reason people are using these terms a lot more is because we have been seeing more of it. I don't know if we're seeing more of the generalized, just kind of daily anxiety, or if we're seeing more of the chronic anxiety, but I've heard statistics. I don't know if you have them off the top of your head, but I've heard statistics of, rates of anxiety have just skyrocketed since the 2020 pandemic. Rates of anxiety skyrocketing with the use of social media in the past decade. Is that chronic anxiety, or is that us using the term anxiety loosely?
Sure. So I don't have the statistics, but We should cite those. That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can pull that up. But yes, I know from reading articles anecdotally what I'm seeing in my clients. Absolutely. There's an increase in anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. I've seen a lot of the story I was getting from, through 2020, 2021, even 2022 from parents is my child has never shown these characteristics before. And now suddenly they're locked in their room. They're engaging in these behaviors. So we've definitely, I can attest to, I've seen a huge increase in this more clinical anxiety and OCD. I think because the level of stressors humans are facing and uncertainty, anxiety and OCD are diseases around dealing with uncertainty. And our world has seen so much uncertainty lately. We don't know what the mask policy is. We don't know what school looks like. We don't, there's just constant uncertainty. And yes, social media can add to that experience when it feels like everyone else has it figured out. And I'm the only one struggling with this sense of unknown and how do I handle it? So yeah, probably a little bit of both. I think a lot of celebrities now are more open about talking about anxiety, about talking about their OCD. And so that's great. I mean, the more we can normalize it and have people share. I know for people within the OCD community, it can feel frustrating if it's thrown around lightly of like, oh, I'm so OCD. I'm so organized, when it's like you have no idea the years of suffering and debilitating effect of this disease. And so that's where we do maybe want to be sensitive around. I feel maybe a bit like I'm being a bit controlling today, or I'm being a bit, perfectionistic today, but maybe we don't want to use the term OCD unless we actually know if we have that disease, mental health.
I agree completely. A client of mine from the fall comes to mind who, in one of our first, I think before I enrolled her as a client, she used that term. She said, well, I'm OCD and I'm OCD with exercise and I'm OCD with, and I said, do you have obsessive compulsive disorder? I said, is this diagnosed? And she said, well, no, but And I was like, no, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I need to know if this is something, because and she was using the term more loosely. Now, did she have obsessive thoughts about exercise? Yes, she did. But we were able, it wasn't to the level of this diagnosis, and something that, in working together and reframing her mindset around exercise and what it meant to her and her relationship with exercise and relationship with food, she's in a way better place. But yeah, like I was like in that session, I was like, I need to know what you mean by that, because I don't know what you mean, because the term's being thrown around and there's a big difference. I think, like you said, people have, you're suffering if this is something that you're dealing with, really.
And that reminds me, I do want to point out that intrusive thoughts are completely normal. All humans, we get strange thoughts. Like you could walk by a bridge and have the thought like, what if I jumped? And you're like, that was weird. Why did I have that thought? But if we are not suffering with OCD, our brain usually filters it out. Like, that was weird. On I go with my day. OCD is more about what do you do with that thought? Oh, that means I'm an unsafe person. I need to go home. I can't trust myself. And it's more the reaction. It's how I often differentiate when people are struggling with, wait, I get intrusive thoughts. It's like, yes, but if you can move along from them, then probably we're not looking at OCD. Also with rituals, superstitious behavior is very normal. All of us as humans, we have some type of like, oh, I prefer to sleep on this side of the bed, or I like when we maybe even have an order we get dressed, or we have a certain ritual before a race. If it's not interfering with our day, we can be flexible. For example, for some reason in a hotel, you do sleep on the other side of the bed, then once again, probably not OCD. It's just a ritual we enjoy. It's more of the question of if you had to, for example, sleep on the other side of the bed and someone says, oh, I could never. I wouldn't sleep all night. Level 10 out of 10 anxiety. Like, okay, then we might be looking at this as OCD.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. As you're talking and just mentioning that so much of this is dealing with uncertainty, and we've had a lot of uncertainty in our lives as humans over the last few years. So but I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but people's reaction, if they're having anxiety or experiencing OCD because of the uncertainty in their life, very often their reaction is, then it has to be certain. I have to know the answers. I have to find the certainty, which is actually not the reality and probably not your treatment for it either. I mean, there's
Yes.
certain things that maybe there's certain things we might be able to know more. And I think what I do too, I try to teach my clients, fundamentals of nutrition so that they do have certainty of, okay, this is good for me to eat and this is why I'm eating it and things like that. So there's some level of certainty, but there's also still a lot of uncertainty. So in your treatment, right, I imagine it's a lot of how do we cope with uncertainty? How do we filter that out?
Yes, you named it. I disappoint clients sometimes in the first few sessions because they think coming in for anxiety treatment, like, thank you, you'll finally answer this question for me of, can I do this? Or what's the right answer here? And usually more of my response is, that's a tough one. And it's hard to know exactly what the answer is because I can give you what my personal stance is, but that doesn't mean it is the one answer. And then what I'm asking is, what I'm referring to is questions like, is my boyfriend the right person for me? I can't necessarily answer that for you, but we do differentiate what are concrete solvable problems versus like unknown future problems. So maybe there's a concrete problem of, okay, do we want to work on communication? Do you feel like there's a specific thing with your relationship you'd like to work on? As far as what does that mean for the future and will he be the one or will we break up? Those are answerable questions. And so that's where we kind of I call it like OCD land or anxiety land. It's like, it's going to feed on that unanswerable question. And so at some point we have to accept, I'm going to do the best I can with the information I have and I'm going to move forward. And like maybe if we put that in the term of sports, it's like, I can do the concrete training, but I don't know what the actual outcome from that will be, right? Or nutrition.
I don't know what's going to happen on game day, right?
Yes.
I can control for the things that are within my control of showing up to practice every day and giving it my best effort on that day. But on game day, on race day, that's, there are certain things out of my control. The weather, how other people perform.
Sure. Do I get an injury? And what's a big piece is learning self-compassion too of, is that actually your quote unquote fault? Sometimes things just happen and that then we learn our own resilience from these unfortunate, challenging things sometimes. So I try to always reframe that even if a bad thing happens, we're going to learn to get through that thing and that's going to be okay.
Hey fans, I hope you are enjoying this conversation, but an important part of it is a word from our awesome sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Inside Tracker. Thanks to Inside Tracker, I've been able to catch iron deficiency and anemia on 2 different occasions in the past few years. And with this, I was able to kickstart my recovery to better fueling and workouts without having to coordinate doctor's appointments or wait around for my lab results. With Inside Tracker, I'm able to get my blood drawn whenever I want to and see everything that I want to. Personally, I get the Ultimate Plan a couple times a year to check up on my blood biomarkers and nutritional status. And thanks to Inside Tracker, I'm able to implement the science-based nutrition and lifestyle recommendations immediately after results come in with their user-friendly online platform and personalized action plan. This is why I've been able to reverse iron deficiency so quickly, because my health is in my own hands when I'm using Inside Tracker. Created by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometrics, Inside Tracker analyzes your blood, DNA, and fitness tracking data to identify where you're optimized and where you're not. You'll get a daily action plan with personalized guidance on the right exercise, nutrition, and supplementation for your body. And when you connect Inside Tracker with your Fitbit or Garmin, you'll also unlock real-time recovery pro tips after you complete your workout. It's like having your own personal trainer and nutritionist in your pocket. For a limited time, you can get 20% off the entire Inside Tracker store by heading to insidetracker.com/riseup. There's a lot more that it can show you and that you can do with it besides just your iron. That's just my personal experiences. So again, head to insidetracker.com/riseup. That's RISEUP for 20% off. Back to the show. Yeah. So speaking of sport, do you see, I think all people can have anxiety disorders and OCD, but I think there are some traits, whether it be the pressures of competitive sport or a perfectionist personality trait. Are there some traits that overlap and make athletes more at risk or more prone to suffer from some anxiety disorders.
Yes, absolutely. There has been some recent research looking at NCAA athletes and the prevalence of OCD and anxiety. And I don't have the exact numbers, but what I remember is it was about double what the normal population would have, like quote unquote normal, that like if you took a sample of athletes, you could see a much higher prevalence.
Yeah, almost double.
And that isn't surprising to me from a clinical standpoint, because what are the traits that might make a good athlete? We'd probably look at discipline, highly structured, able to push through pain, maybe singularly focused, able to block out distractions, right? So some of those are very positive things. And also, if we're looking at a Venn diagram, would probably overlap with OCD as well, is that using rituals, having very black and white thinking, wanting to control all outcomes. So definitely don't want to make it sound like, one equals the other, but yes, I could see overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think, so where another one of your specialties is working with people with eating disorders as well, because then is there overlap there too? I've certainly talked on this podcast plenty about the overlap of athletes and eating disorders. Do all athletes have eating disorders? No. Do all people with eating disorders are athletes? No. But again, some of those personality traits cross over of, wanting to control things, wanting every food to be perfect, wanting to make sure that their health or appearance is a certain way for their sport. And so is there an overlap as well with the eating disorder struggles and then anxiety or OCD too?
Yes, absolutely. I think you just named it, that often that personality type that can be perfectionistic, which what am I even saying when I say perfectionistic? It's someone.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's get into that.
Yeah, because that's a term we throw around. It actually does not mean you're perfect. Some people say I can't be a perfectionist. I don't do anything right. Well, it's actually the fear of failure that defines perfectionism. As I work so hard at, and it might be in one area of your life where it feels like everything else is messy or falling apart, but at least in my sport, I want to do it perfectly, or in my food, my eating patterns. And so it's a striving for perfection that defines perfectionism. Also, we see a rigidity in that I have no flexibility in making mistakes. It's an all or nothing. Either I'm doing it right or I'm failing, which in and of itself kind of lends to how do we treat this, is by teaching that two opposing things can exist at the same time, which means I could have made a mistake on my homework tonight and I'm still a good student. Those might feel opposing if you're a perfectionist. Or I could have had a bad race this week and I still love running, or I'm not rejected by my whole team. So it's really teaching that it's not black and white. And so, sorry, I think I got lost from your question, but the question was OCD, right? And eating disorders overlapping.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And so, yes, that trait of perfectionism often is seen in both disorders. And so there is a lot of overlap, especially, a lot of adolescent females. I see a lot of that overlap. If they're, good students and they're good athletes, we might see this overlap if they're trying in every area of their life so hard to reach this goal of perfection, success.
So stemming from this into my next question, I want to sandwich it with a story of a client.
Oh, okay.
Who comes to mind. And the only reason she doesn't work with you is because she's not in Colorado or California. But
yes.
I know we're gonna figure something out. Carrie and I have been having conversations about how to work together more and collaborate more. But I know that with actual therapy treatment, you do have to be licensed within the state that the clients are residing in. So I digress. So a client that comes to mind is one who suffered from a severe eating disorder in high school and was also a very good athlete, a very good runner. When I say severe eating disorder, hospitalization. And so was able to recover in those in the ways that a hospital would clear somebody for recovery,
Sure,
right?
so we're looking at
Saying,
refeeding.
refeeding, weight restoration, great. And then she continues to run, but she's truly not healed from this issue, right? So she comes to me and she makes amazing progress and she's well fueled. She is fueling amazing. She's recovered her period. She's worked through injuries. She made it to a collegiate NCAA team. She's competing. All that's really good. But there's also not diagnosed due to healthcare issues at this time, but I would call it OCD with certain exercise habits, that are beyond just the needs of an athlete, right? Needing to hit X amount of steps or do X amount of crunches or on the minute or hour type of behaviors. And this also stems from an intrusive thought of what if I gain weight, a fear of weight gain, or what if my body changes? So that obsessive thought about a fear of body or body dysmorphia then causes the compulsive behavior. And this is, a root problem that then for many years drove the eating disorder and issues with running, which we've healed that, but the obsessive thought is still there.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want that story to kind of segue into some of the work you do as well in the space of body dysmorphia and people dealing with fat phobia, because I think in the space of athletes that when you earlier said, I wrote it down, that OCD, you were like, the obsessive is the intrusive thought and it starts with a what if. Oh my goodness, have I heard, what if I gain weight? How many times a day do I hear that from people? What if I gain weight? But what if I gain weight? But what if I gain weight? It just so often in my world of nutrition, it comes back to that. And that's what I'm working with clients is like, what if your fueling has nothing to do with weight? What if by fueling well, you perform better? What if you reach your goals? What if then you're happier? What if then you're healthier? I turn the what if to the positive, but so often clients are stuck on that question, but what if I gain weight? And so there's this big fear of fat, fear of weight, and very often body dysmorphia involved there too. So that was my story. Segue. So like, this is like the perfect client that kind of combines all of this.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
So let's start with some definitions again, because you've been so great at providing definitions. What is body dysmorphia? What is fat phobia?
Yeah, absolutely. So body dysmorphia is its own separate diagnosis, a little different than anxiety and OCD in that it's a focus on a particular body part. And so it can be associated with fat. It can also be associated with I don't like my nose or I don't like my ears. Often we see the overlap with eating disorders. It might be focused on arms, legs, stomach, buttocks, an area where there is fat might play into that area. And so what it is, it's a very narrow focus on this part of my body is so horrible and so ugly that I can't even I can't go out in the world. It is so catastrophically a problem. So what we see is this big overestimation of how big of a problem is. And it's really a disorder of a distorted perception. So what's interesting, clients will come into my office thinking, I'm going to answer the question of, is my stomach quote unquote normal or not? And I have no interest in what their stomach looks like or isn't normal, because what's interesting is what this perception you have of your stomach and why is that so important to who you are as a person. Unfortunately, what we see a lot of times is people striving for, if I fix quote unquote this issue, then I will feel better. But maybe people go into plastic surgery or they do have an eating disorder. In some way, they do change that body part. And lo and behold, it moves to something else. It's like, well, now it's not my nose, but it was my ears I always hated. And my ears are really the problem. And so what that indicates is this wasn't about if we fix that area, but rather I'm putting my whole self-esteem into what this body image, quote unquote, should look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not only that example you just gave of okay, you do change how your nose looks, but now it's something else.
Yeah.
I even see that in the pursuit of weight, right? Some people will say, well, if I just lost 5 pounds, I'd be happier. I'd be more confident. They lose 5 pounds. That's not good enough for them. They're like, well, if I just lost 3 more pounds.
well, if I just lost a little bit more, well, if I just got down to X weight, and it's like, it just keeps going because that wasn't what was going to make you happier, fulfilled, more.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sorry, I was speaking over you. I got so excited.
It was good. Perfect. Yeah. So let's talk now about treatment, because I'm sure a lot of listeners, and no, you can't heal all our listeners' problems in just a few short minutes, but like, a lot of people might be listening and saying like, I'm definitely suffering from chronic anxiety, or like, or I definitely have body dysmorphia, or I might be trending that way, or I don't want this to worsen. And a lot of people can, rationally, if they're in a, it's a good day, they're in a decent headspace, they can rationally understand, like, yes, I know that my worth is not based on how my stomach looks.
Yeah.
And yet that intrusive thought keeps coming up anyways.
Right.
And so like, what does real treatment look like? Because I hear that so often, that people can rationally understand, and yet their brain just continues the obsessive or intrusive thought over and over and over again. What does treatment for, whether it be, I don't know if it's different things and you want to kind of talk about body dysmorphia, OCD, anxiety differently, or if, what would the process of treatment look like?
Yeah, I'd say it's very similar overall approach. And then I have some nuances with, each disorder. But the first thing, when you say that question of, I know logically this doesn't make sense, or I know logically it doesn't line up with my values. Because that's sometimes what clients share with me is like, I actually value like maybe girl power, like loving our bodies. And like, that's important to me. And yeah, I hate my body. And like, so there's this disconnect.
I hear that all the time.
Right. And so then we're going to look at, okay, what's underneath that? So I walk them through a technique technically it's called the downward arrow, but we're looking at, what's your core fear underneath this statement? So then I say, okay, let's say you gain weight. And they're like, I don't want to gain weight. I'm like, I know. We're going to say you gain weight tomorrow and you wake up and you have 5 pounds more. What comes up for you? And so we want to explore what's underneath that. Is it the fear I'm going to be so ugly no one talks to me? Okay, if no one talks to you, what does that mean? Well, that means I'm a loser. Okay, if you're a loser, what's bad about that? Well, then I'll never be happy. Anyways, we just keep going down and down and down until we get to maybe it's ultimately, I'm afraid I'm going to live my life alone, or I'm afraid I'm always going to be a failure. I'm afraid I can't handle this feeling. So once we kind of figure that out together, like what's really underneath this, what we'll typically find is it's connected to other fears this person has. We say like, that's interesting, because in school, you also engage in, maybe I'm avoiding speaking publicly because I don't want to be embarrassed. And so I can connect back to the same fear. And so it helps to show that this fear isn't so much about just fat on your body, but it's a general fear of, I don't want to be rejected. And so then we can kind of start from there and work through what does rejection mean, and building. So now I can connect it to my treatment modality called ERP, exposure and response prevention. So what is that? That means we're going to kind of look at what are your fears. So let's say I'm afraid of wearing an outfit and someone judging me, and I don't like the way I feel like my quote, my fat's sticking out of this outfit. So I would help them build a hierarchy of, okay, so what would you rate that from 1 to 10? 10 out of 10 being it's a panic attack fear, or this is 1 would be, it's a little uncomfortable. Like, it's not really going to bother me. And they might rate that, oh, well, if I did it at home and it's just my family, that's it's a 5 out of 10. If I had to do that at school, 8 out of 10. And so we rate a whole list together of different fears, different scenarios. And sometimes they're playful and they look at me like, Carrie, you're crazy. I would never, ever do that. But we get creative together of, even if it's things like they're afraid of being judged. Okay, what if you dropped trash and you didn't pick it up and you just like walked on by? Like, what would that mean about you? What would that say? And then I start teaching them skills to try these exposures with, and by the way, there's always the caveat. I will never make someone do something that's actually dangerous that they could actually be harmed from. So these are, these are safe, but they don't feel safe from their anxiety's perspective.
Right.
And then I teach them to tolerate, like, wow, you handled that, even though your anxiety set was going to be this horrible. What was it actually like versus what you expected? And learning the core skills, learning, I can handle it. Actually, I'm not going to be rejected in the way I predicted. And even if there's some rejection, that's a normal part of human experience and I can experience it. And then we kind of build backwards to come to the idea of like fat in particular of like, a lot of education of like, what's the purpose of fat? Is that actually a bad thing on our body? What are we contributing to as far as the bigger picture of culture? If you're saying I have to get all fat off my body. And so yeah, it's kind of this combination of values. What are your goals? And then also teaching the skills of handling that distress along the way.
Yeah. And such a process, right? Because I think as you were explaining that, it's like, you really have to keep peeling back the layers of what would that mean for you? And, and that's a process to go through and get to the root and then start slowly exposing yourself to the root in a way that is safe and that you can handle it.
Yes.
But it builds your confidence over time. And so I think this exposure treatment, exposure and response prevention, it is a process. And I think that's fair to give people that knowledge of, if you really want to see improvements in how your brain thinks or how you respond to anxiety, to OCD, to body dysmorphia, like this will be a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, lots of education up front. There's often questions of like, I'm going to do what? And the key is starting slow. And so you get early successes. It could be as much as like, you're wearing a different colored sock and no one knows, but you just know you're a little bit imperfect that day, and like we build up from there. And when you said that, it reminded me to clarify that, I have no idea what the root cause was or what the root cause is just when someone comes and tells me I'm afraid of getting fat. It's easy to make an assumption about that, but until I've talked to that person, it could be about their history. It could be about a future fear, about preventing their sport, so we have to really dig down so then we know what we're targeting for their fear.
And I think too, another thing is like with that fear, with that exposure, sometimes people have a fear because they're like, well, I did expose myself to this one time and it ended poorly, or I was rejected, or somebody did make a terrible comment to me, or my boyfriend broke up, or then I just came in last place in that race. And so they're holding on to that negative experience that, no, I whatever it might be, I had exposure to that thing that I'm so scared of. Yeah, I already know the facts, right? And I think for those people, again, to be open to doing this process again, because that doesn't have to be your truth in every scenario of life moving forward, even if it was one time in your past.
Right.
Or learning how to cope and deal with that. I don't know if you have any extra comments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a very common response. And so what we look at is how cool it would be to have this, because what we can predict about life is it's going to be unpredictable, right? We're going to have hardships. There's going to be days that suck. And so what I want to help build is the resilience and the trust in yourself that like next time, if something happens, you'll know how to respond to that, whatever negative comment in a way that's like, you know what, that's about them and their struggles with their body. That's not about me. And I'm sorry that they're struggling and I'm fine. Or even if it's like, ouch, that hurts me today. You know what? I need to go on a nice walk and listen to music. But I know that doesn't define me. Mm-hmm. And so it's turning away from like, yeah, things can, instead of it happens, that means, I have to always avoid that. It's like, actually, we're going to go towards those things because they're very likely to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent. Well, Carrie, this has been a really helpful, like a very helpful conversation, both from definitions to actual examples. I think just sharing how so many of these things can overlap. So I'd love to highlight, your work for anybody listening. Yeah. So your practice again is called Cultivate Healing. You are licensed to treat and counsel people in California and Colorado, and you can do so virtually. And your website is cultivatehealingcolorado.com, Instagram, Cultivate Healing CO, Facebook, Cultivate Healing CO. Anything else you'd like to share about your program or your work? Are you now accepting new clients?
Yes, I am accepting new clients. And yep, that's where you can find me. I'm happy to consult as well. Therapy can be a scary thing to jump into. So if you're wondering like, well, what's the first step? You can just reach out and we have a 15-minute free phone call and, chat. And if I'm not the right fit, I'm very happy to get you to a person that'd be good for you. So yeah, that's kind of how the process works.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, I just want to share that I know Carrie through a mutual client, so you can work with both of us at the same time and you just get the best results ever.
Absolutely. And one day we'll have a superpower center. I don't know, with everything.
Yes. We're going to figure it out with these state laws and regulations and things like that. We're going to figure it out. So, Carrie, closing remarks. I ask all my guests the same questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, here we go.
If there was one food you could eat every single day for the rest of your life, but never get sick of it, what would it be?
Ooh, I think honestly, mac and cheese. Oh, I love a good macaroni and cheese. Yep.
Absolutely. What's your favorite sport to participate in yourself?
Right. I don't know if it's considered well, I participate in yoga right now. That is my absolute favorite, coming from a dance background. I don't dance anymore. And I probably would love to have my own hangups about that. But but yoga is what I love.
That's great. How about as a spectator? Is there something that you enjoy being, a fan or on the sidelines cheering on?
Yeah. My brother ran track, and he ran actually University of Oregon. So I really love watching track and Olympics, the Olympic events. And unfortunately, even though I was a cheerleader, I'm a horrible sports fan. So, So I'm there to make snacks and talk and provide entertainment, but I'm not such a good spectator.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah.
All right. And then final question. Is there a female athlete out there, whether professional and well-known or just in your personal life, a female athlete that you want to give a shout out to for being a role model, being an inspiration to others?
I mean, what instantly popped in my head is Simone Biles. I mean, of course, I don't know her personally. I wish I did, but just such a great model of honoring when things are too much, because that's a part of anxiety treatment too, is when we know, okay, this is going to be too much. It's going to be detrimental. And she was able to pull back, but then show up again and face her fears. And so I really admire, what she's educating and providing.
Amazing. And we admire what you're educating and providing to so many people in need. So, Carrie, thank you again so much. And we'll include some links if you want to be in touch or reach out to Carrie in the show notes.
All right, great. Thanks, Lindsey.
Fans, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, I don't want you to miss out on things that I know you need. First, if you need help overcoming nutrition concerns, perhaps something we talked about in this episode, look no further. You have your female athlete specialist in sports dietetics right here. So head to my website, www.riseupnutritionrun.com, and book a free call with me to learn more about how I may be able to help you. My flagship program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation, aka the Fast Track, helps female athletes overcome disordered eating and perform at their highest level. The life-changing transformations that we help clients with don't just happen by listening to podcasts. It happens by taking action with people who are guiding you to your goals, aka me. So call me, head to the website, www.riseupnutritionrun.com, and book it in. Take action, overcome your nutrition struggles as fast as possible. I am here to help. Second, don't forget about our amazing sponsors, Inside Tracker, insidetracker.com/riseup for 20% off. Also, we are supported by R.U.N. If you are an athlete in need of a quick fueling option with clean, good ingredients, look no further than R.U.N. I absolutely love their ready-to-drink whey-based shakes for post-workout on the go. As a listener of this podcast, enjoy 30% off your first order with the code RISEUP30. All caps, RISEUP30. Last, if you are a dietitian, coach, or health professional needing a platform to manage your business, coordinate with your clients, invoice, communicate, and more, look no further than Practice Better. Get a 14-day free trial and 20% off your first 4 months by clicking the link in the show notes and using the code RISEUP20. I've been using Practice Better for 4 years now to manage my business, and I promise it's the best way to manage your practice. Look, lady, since you are doing all of those things for you, my last request, if you're willing, is to do something for me. Please head over to our ratings and reviews, leave a 5-star rating, leave a positive review if you like this podcast, and please tell a friend about this amazing podcast or an episode that you think they need so that you and others around you can be fierce, fit, and fueled. Until next time, fuel fiercely.